Thank you all for having me. I'm going to start by imitating some of my seniors that have left my pre-calculus at some point. Austin, Anthony, I'm sure, has left my class this year at some point doing something along these lines. Mr. Koffel is the most boring teacher ever. He keeps telling me about horizontal asymptotes. I don't give a damn about horizontal asymptotes. Why are we learning about domain? Why are we learning about range? What's the point? I will never ever use a horizontal asymptote in my life. I will never ever use domain. I don't give a damn. Why am I here? Anthony? Something. Thank you. So that's my question for you. Why are you here today? Why are you here at this school? Why are you taking pre-calculus? Why are you taking integrative? I'd like you to start just 5 minutes or so individually. You've got on your note sheet there, Dear Alien. I'd like you to take about 5 minutes to present to an alien why you are here. Why do we take school in America? What's the point of this? All right. Please be creative with this, so you can write it out. You can do it in a poem. You can draw a picture. There's probably going to be a language barrier, so that might be the best option. And then I'd ask you at the end of 5 minutes or so to share a couple of these with the class. So 5 minutes. Why are you here today? Why did you sit in my pre-calculus class and learn about domain and range? Does everybody have a sheet? Try to be creative in your explanation to Mr. and Mrs. Alien. like you to now spell the word cemetery, fold it up. Is anybody willing to share any of their thoughts, explanations to why we're here?
I will.
Thank you.
So I said that the purpose of school is for us to get an education so that it can benefit us in the future, and so we can get into college and get a job and like be able to provide for like ourselves and like other people.
Okay. So progress, the next step, right? We learn pre-calculus so we can learn calculus, so we can get into college, so we can get a degree, so we can get a job, so we can put food on the table. Anybody else want to share? Yeah, thank you.
The human race is here because we are evolution's big mistake. The Earth and its life on it were all able to peacefully coexist with each other until humans came along. Our high intelligence levels caused the balance to shift completely in the human's direction. Now, instead of us adapting to our environments, we adapt our environments to us to make us temporarily invincible, or so it seems.
Nice. I like that. Anybody want to share one more? Yes.
Because I was just speaking to the American school system, it doesn't take into account like what your career is going to be until your last few years of college. So at a young age, you take an array of classes, and that kind of promotes intellectual curiosity, so you know what you like and what you don't like.
Okay, good. I think yesterday you might have talked about that word curiosity a little bit, maybe. Yes. Okay. Anyways, I like that word a lot. Good, thank you. I'm sure there's some other really good ones out there. So today I come with 3 objectives. I'd like to educate your mind, body, and soul. That's a big task in 45 minutes. I'd like to first apologize to your teachers. My primary source today is Wikipedia. I am not as well read as Mr. Hudgens or as versed as your other teachers, so please bear with me here. I'm going to raise a lot of questions today that I don't necessarily know the answers to and won't begin to suggest I do. We're going to talk about education. We're going to focus on American education, the basis of American education from a historic, statistical, scientific, artistic, political perspectives. So, why do we educate? We educate because we view knowledge as progress, right? Somebody said that already. We view knowledge as progress. Humans are always striving to progress. That's my take on it, and clearly some of your classmates as well. In 2016, there are roughly 75 million students enrolled from kindergarten through graduate schools. Today, 85% of the adult population has completed high school. Over 1 in 4 have a bachelor's degree or higher. What's the cost? Obviously, countless hours. You've spent many hours sitting in class. There's teachers who are spending many hours with you. There's also financial cost. Over $1 trillion just this year between federal, state, and local budgets. Are the results of education worth the massive human and financial resources to educate our society? I don't know. Government-supported and free public schools for all began to be established after the American Revolution. A gentleman by the name of Horace Mann, who is, quote, the father of the common school movement, designed a system in the late 1700s that taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. This is over 200 years ago, and it sounds awfully familiar today. Mann said, quote, education then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of conditions of man, the balance wheel of social machinery. So that's the quote here. Education then, beyond all other devices of human origin, is the great equalizer of the conditions of men, the balance wheel of social machinery. To me, that's a very powerful statement. According to Mann, to educate is to make equal. I find that to be a big statement. So, what should we be learning? Right? Horace Mann set up this system where you basically take English and history and math and geography and history. Is that what we should be learning? Right? I would suggest that the vast majority of the $1 trillion that goes towards education this year is going towards enhancing your brain output. We're essentially educating one organ of your body. Are we making the most of that money? I don't know. Are high schools preparing students with the skills and knowledge necessary to excel after graduation? So that idea of we take calculus so that we can get into college, we get into college so we can get a job, is that really working? With only 1 in 4 high school graduates deemed college ready in the 4 core subjects of English, reading, math, and science, it would be easy to argue that reform is necessary. We still today learn the same subjects that were the focus of 18th century education, but live in a drastically different society. I'm going to pause for a second. We've got a limited sample size here when we're talking about American education. We are not talking about education in other countries. We're not talking about education beyond the American Revolution. But obviously there's a vast amount of information there. I would encourage you on your own to delve into that information as you see fit, as you're interested. But we don't have time for that scope today. So I would argue that reform could be necessary. We're teaching these same classes, English, reading, math, and science, that have been taught for 200 plus years. Students aren't necessarily deemed college ready after high school. Why does our society define math, science, English, history as the core of education? Why aren't the core subjects theater, art, PE, dance? Why aren't those the classes that are required amongst every student in America? So many studies have shown that students' attention span is roughly 12 to 15 minutes. Why are our classes 45 minutes long? When you get to college, why are you taking a 50-minute class or a 65-minute class or a 90-minute class? Why is that happening? Well, since it's been about 10 minutes and Anthony's probably tired of hearing me talk again, just pick it on. Let's take a little bit of a break. Show of hands, who's been fully locked in so far? Good. Who thinks if we went on for another 10 minutes they would stay fully locked in? Okay. Good. Who's close to that zoning out point? All right. So let's take a pause then and get away from me. And let's do something other than educate your mind. Please feel free to participate as much as you wish, as you are able. But we're going to try a little bit of yoga here. We're going to shut the computers. You can throw... Sorry, we don't have 6 minutes for this. We need to get back to math and science and history and English, right? This stuff is not meaningful, right? We have to educate your brain. That's why we're here. So, back to it. Why do we focus on math, science, English, history? In my opinion, there are 3 possible answers. 1, the status quo. This is the way it's always been done. We've successfully educated children for 200 years. Our nation is a thriving first world country. Why are we going to change now? Education is a machine that is rolling along. It's hard to stop. 2, justify the costs. The government needs data to justify the cost of education. With a $1 trillion tax price, the American people deserve to know what they're getting out of education. The current core subjects are easier to test on standardized assessments than, say, dance or photography would be. So we focus on math and history and English. The third possible reason for why we focus on those core subjects is job preparation. The current core subjects prepare students for jobs after college. I can see this answer carrying some weight, personally. However, the job market is changing rapidly, and graduates need to rely on creativity more than ever. They need to rely on curiosity more than ever. Do our core classes encourage creativity? Do our core classes encourage curiosity? For me, status quo, cost, and job preparation should not justify why we learn what we learn. I don't think that these are good enough reasons to say, oh, I'm sorry, those aren't them. I don't think these status quo, justify cost, and job prep, I don't think that those are good enough reasons to say we should learn these core subjects. I agree with the idea that all decisions on education should be rooted in creating a system that provides the fullest possible development of each learner, with the goals of living morally, living creatively, and living productively within society. It's possible that those go hand in hand, but I think we should really root our decisions in creating students that live morally, live creatively, and live productively within society. So, I'd ask you guys to take a minute in your notes individually, reflect on the question, what do you think we should be learning? So we already explained to an alien why we're here. I'd like you to take a minute to respond to the question, what should you be learning? Should you be sitting in my free calculus class learning about the domain of a rational function? Or is there something else that you should be learning when you spend your time here? Let's go ahead and take 1 or 2 minutes. What should you be learning? Just as important as what should would be the question, why? Why are you interested in learning that? Why should you be learning that? What should we be learning, and why should we be learning it? Take about 30 more seconds to reflect on and write your thoughts down to what should we be learning and why. All right, would anybody like to share any of their thoughts on what we should be learning?
It really depends on like what you want to be when you grow up. Like there should be a general like standard for every student like to take basic classes like 9th grade English, 9th grade math, 9th grade history and all that. But after that, after you finish this general education, you should be able to dive deep into what you actually want to study and like take, you know, if you want to become a doctor, take more biology classes, take more chemistry classes. If you want to be a mathematician, take more math classes. Don't take a lot of English classes or history classes. And same goes for humanities major.
Yeah. I appreciate that thought. I'm going to come with a counterpoint. A lot of medical schools now are encouraging their undergrad students to have humanities degrees. They want them to be able to think creatively from some of the liberal arts colleges. It's a completely different perspective from what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from, right? If you want to learn about bio, and let's learn about bio, right? But there is a counter movement towards that in some areas.
I think that also it's based on like your career, but there's some things that everyone should learn. Skills that everyone needs no matter their field, or to be able to think, to read, think, to speak, and to write.
Yeah.
So those humanities courses that teach you how to write and how to communicate with other people are very important for everyone.
I think I should learn more. I don't know how to pay taxes. I don't know how to pay a mortgage. I think that there should be classes that teach you real life skills that you're going to need, because I'd rather not be in a crap load of debt when I'm older.
Right.
So I'd rather be taught how to pay certain things that
Yeah.
I need to pay for late payment.
Yeah. I mean, I teach horizontal asymptotes, but outside of that, I don't use horizontal asymptotes half as much as I pay my bills, and I understand my taxes, and yeah. So, respect. Good. That's pretty simple.
Kind of a combination of what Yanni and Catherine said. So I feel like you should learn whatever you're going to use, and so that applies to your career, but also to your life as a citizen. So you're responsible for being prepared to do your job and to be a member of society. So I guess just things that give context to the world.
Good. One more.
I've always found history and literature to be the most useful because they give the most insight to the human condition, but I think there's also merit to learning biology and chemistry because those help us understand the world around us and help with engineering, which is also key to making technological breakthroughs. Because I think everything we learn now is probably useful.
We're going to shift gears a little bit. So, why is education compulsory? Anybody define compulsory for me?
Required by law.
Yeah, right. There is a law that says you must attend school. All right. So we're a little bit back to where we started. Why are we here? And actually, more than why are we here? Why are we forced to be here? Why is the government saying yes, you must attend school? I think there's a fundamental shift in human nature and our desire to experience something when it's something possible versus something that's required. I started this lecture on the basis that some external force is requiring you to do something undesirable. Some external force is forcing you to sit in pre-calculus class. And I think a lot of times we treat school that way, that somebody is forcing us to do this. Well, that quite honestly is true. Right? Between 1852 and 1917, states passed laws making school compulsory. There is a period of education that is required amongst all persons in the United States. In 1892, a group of educators known as the Committee of 10 recommended that children should receive 12 years of instruction. They broke that down into 8 years of elementary education, known as grammar schools, followed by 4 years of high school. This is 1892, right? Over 100 years ago, they're recommending 12 years of education. Is that still the best today? I don't know. By the turn of the century, the early 1900s, regional groupings of schools organized to coordinate standards, examinations, as well as requirements for admission, course completion, and graduation. By 1930, all American children attended school except those with disabilities. I'm going to pause here again. By 1930, all children attended school except those with disabilities. One thing that I'm drastically glossing over in American education, the history of American education, is differences between whites and non-whites, between men and women, between those that had a disability and those that did not have a disability. So that's, again, something that I would encourage you to move forward with in your own interest. We'll talk about a little bit of that here in a second, but that is something that's completely glossed over. So we set up these standards in the early 1900s, these standards for examinations, for admissions, for course completion, graduation, and while those standards have changed, there's relatively the same standard. We're taking the same courses. We are still taking 12 years of pre-college education. I think maybe it's time to look at those standards and blow those up and completely start over. While we adapt them, it's a lot harder to adapt something and have drastic change than it is to just blow it up and start over again. It's hard to fathom how that would even begin to happen. I find it incredibly exciting. I think as we move forward into a even more technologically advanced age, we see this already occurring. We see Khan Academy. Could you attend high school by going to khanacademy.org? Whatever. Anyway, could you attend high school and get a degree by attending Khan Academy? Right? Is that something that is coming? Right? I don't know. But I think there are certainly some ways that education could change. Is our current education system perfect? Certainly not. Ultimately, I believe the reason we are here, the first question that I came to, ultimately I believe the reason we're here is because we aspire to be educated. Education in an idyllic American world gives us a chance to be successful. So, tonight, I'm going to ask you to watch 2 TED Talks. Can anybody tell me what a TED Talk is?
So they're like talks. They're sort of like what you're doing right now.
Okay.
They're just 10 to 25-minute long talks from people who are experts in the field that they're talking about. And it's either to persuade or to like show the population something that they may not have known that
awesome.
they would find that's interesting.
Awesome. I think you can find yourself weaving through the TED website sometimes and watching videos. One of my favorite TED Talks is on classical music. I don't like classical music, but I found myself enthralled with this guy who did like classical music. And at the end, I'm like, oh yeah, I should listen to classical music more often. And it was just very engaging. So the 2 TED Talks tonight. The second one actually goes along with this slide a little bit. If you flip your sheet over, Sir Ken Robinson is an educationalist. I would probably prefer you look at that second, but not a big deal either way. His big idea is that our schools crush creativity. I think Glenelg actually, in my opinion, I think Glenelg does a very good job of encouraging creativity relative to other schools. But could it be better? Always. So his big idea is that schools crush creativity, which is kind of what this cartoon is getting at. We put things into the education machine, we get graduates out. In the process, we pull out all the creativity, all the intelligence, we create a product, right? And if you think of the American education system as that machine, it's a little depressing. but I think it is somewhat factual. So he goes into depth about his thoughts on where our education system should be, where it is, where maybe it could be. Along with the video, I think there's also a transcript posted on the class page. It has timestamps, so for your conversations tomorrow, you should be able to reference, like, during Ken Robinson's talk at 1:30, he said this. The other one is not about education at all. It's Jill Bolt Taylor. It is about how our brain works, which I think is ultimately intertwined with education. She goes in great depth as to how our brain works. She has studied the brain for a long time and then has a stroke. So as she's having a stroke, she knows exactly what's going on in her brain and is able to describe to you what's going on in her brain in a way that somebody else who has a stroke wouldn't have comprehended, wouldn't have understood. In terms of looking at the transcript versus the video, I would, in particular for hers, I would encourage you to read the transcript while watching the video. She has some visuals, including an actual brain that you don't get from the transcript, right? So she'll be talking about something while she's holding the brain. I would definitely encourage you to watch hers. Ken Robinson's, I think the video is great, but the transcript will give you most of what goes on there as well. But I would encourage you to check both of those out tonight. All right. So, where do we go from here? Some questions. I started by saying I think there's a lot of questions that I don't know the answer to that hopefully you come away wondering. We've talked about some of them, some others. What should education look like? How do our brains process information? I think the one TED Talk will get us to this quite a bit. What do I need to be successful? What do I want? What am I striving for? How is education playing a role in that? How is Glenelg playing a role in that? How's my decision to go to college or what college? How's that playing a role in what I'm striving for? This last piece, again, I glossed over this. Should we educate everyone equally? Should we educate white and non-white students the same? Should we educate men and women the same? Should we educate people with disabilities and people without disabilities the same? Along that line, here's some further investigation. So certainly we're going to check out these TED Talks. Did anybody happen to catch the Michelle Obama piece on CNN, We Will Rise? Okay. I would 100% encourage all of you to devote 40 minutes of your life to watching this. Michelle Obama's big push. Does anybody know what her big push as she's leaving the White House is? What she wants her mark to be as First Lady? What is it? Healthy eating was, yes, that was a huge push of hers. That's true. That's not the one I'm talking about right now. Right now, her big push is to educate women worldwide. All right? In our country, men and women generally are educated very similarly, but in a lot of countries, that's not the case. CNN follows a couple journalists around, one in Morocco and one in Liberia, and tracks, I think it's 6 different women and their educational experiences in Liberia and Morocco. It's really interesting. Does anybody know why educating women is so important? Obviously, like, in this country, it's just kind of like accepted.
Because they're the ones who most likely are raising children, and they need to make sure that their kids are going to be well-formed parts of society.
Yeah, and that's it's just the fundamentals, right? A woman will ultimately be around her kids probably more in some other countries. So if you're educating a woman, hopefully you're educating her whole family from there down. It's a huge push from Michelle Obama. It's something that she found very powerful. I thought that was a great piece. I watched it with my wife. It came on, I think, Friday night or Thursday night. We watched it this weekend. She said she went to Roland Park Country School, an all-girls school, and she's like, Roland Park, every girl here should watch this. And she was like, shoot, every boy should watch this. It's a good piece, so I would check that out. Some other thoughts for investigation. We talked about the difference between white and non-white education, equal but separate. Does anybody know where that comes from?
There's like education system back when there was like a difference between like the black people and white people were being treated differently, and then they claim to be like equal, but they still have the like separate facilities and all sorts of stuff for like different race.
Yeah, so I believe that actual phrase comes from a law in Louisiana, I think it was like late 1800s, that said, yeah, we're educating everybody equally, but we're doing it in different facilities. And when you're doing it in different facilities, then maybe there's different funding, maybe there's different resources, maybe there's different opportunities. But they were justifying that they were educating everybody, just not necessarily in the same facility. Brown versus Board? Anybody know anything about Brown versus Board?
Wasn't that the overturning of Plessy versus Ferguson?
Okay, saying what?
Saying that separate is not equal.
Yeah, right? So it's saying that this separate is not acceptable anymore, right? They were forcing the desegregation of schools. Anybody know the name Ruby Bridges?
Wasn't she one of the first African-American students to go into white school?
Yeah, she's a little girl, I would say 5-ish, 6, in I think it was 1960 Louisiana. And she was one of the first, she was the first at that school, but one of the first nationwide to go into a white school. When she went into this white school, she was surrounded by U.S. Marshals as she's going into the building. There's a very powerful picture of this. Norman Rockwell did a very powerful painting of that. It's graphic, it's tough, but this is 1960. We're talking about 55, 56 years ago. Our country required, it was necessary for a little black girl to be walked into a school by U.S. Marshals. That's crazy to me. That's a country I live in. National School Lunch Act, providing opportunities for food in schools, that's a big thing. Elementary Secondary Education Act, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Now we're talking about educating students with disabilities and without disabilities. No Child Left Behind actually no longer exists. Obama passed something else in December 15, I don't know what it is, but I do want you to see that there's a ton of politics in our education system. The big term from the government these days is Common Core curriculum, right? That's a big idea. Great. Questions? Thoughts?
Mr. Koffel, how do you use some of the things that you study outside of actually being a teacher for your classroom? How do you use that?
Say that again for me.
How do you use the things that you're interested in as a person and as an American citizen? How do you bring them into your classrooms?
Into my classroom? I mean, some of my students have potentially seen, like I probably talk about Syria more than any other math teacher around. I'm always looking at that world. Like I get sad just saying it even just now. Like the war in Syria is mind-blowing to me. Has anybody been watching the presidential debates? Presidential debates have focused on two things. Some guy saying lewd comments and some woman who lost some emails. Right? That's the focus of our election. But I don't know. There's I was reading an article the other day about Yemen. There's a civil war going on in Yemen, and the U.S. is secretly involved in this war. We're backing the Saudis who are bombing the Yemen rebels. My tax dollars killed somebody. We don't talk about that. So I don't know. I find pre-calculus important, but ultimately I don't think that's the most important thing that hopefully you'll get out of coming to any school.
Doesn't that provide a break, 10, 12 minutes?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, hopefully, sometimes. I'm sure I don't abide by that 10 to 15 minute rule. Yes, sir.
In the event that you were given the task of starting a school, what would you do differently?
That's a huge question, right? So blowing up the system is so hard to do because we base everything that we know on the stereotype before, right? If I'm designing a chair, well, what do I think of? The last chair I sat in, right? So if I'm designing a school, it's impossible not to look at the last school I was in. I would say that the number one priority would be to encourage creativity and curiosity. I don't think I do that well in my class in pre-calculus, and some of that I'll blame on the curriculum, but I also am to blame for that. So I would say that has to be like the cornerstone of an education is curiosity and creativity. I also think that we do far too much education of one side of the brain. We educate left side of the brain, I believe. We educate the left side of the brain, right? Well, what about my hand? What about my legs? Like, my son, 2 years old, he gets to run around all the time. They're educating his full body. But in high school, all of a sudden, your body doesn't matter, and we just start educating from here up, and we just focus on the one organ. So I would focus more on educating your entire body.
Thank you, Mr. Koffel.
Thank you. Thank you.
True. They move around constantly. That's true.